not looking away. I'm just on two screens. So, but hello everyone. If I don't know you already, I'm Sam Westwood. I'm Regional Development Manager for the Rivers Trust for the East of England, which is essentially Anglian Water's region. So from the sort of Humber Bank down to South Essex and everywhere in between. So I've been asked today to talk about catchment scale water resource planning. And sort of the role of CABA and what the Rivers Trust generally has been doing in and around this space. So I've got lots of slides. Hopefully you can't tell that they've been plagiarized from several of my colleagues' slide decks. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in certain areas, but there's some really, really clever people that have been working in this space for the Rivers Trust. So hopefully there's some interesting stuff in here. So first of all, I'll just touch on the role of CABA, I guess. So CABA generally, I guess, from a water resource perspective, the role of CABA partnerships is very much around, is that of a convener. Everyone is sort of recognises that. It's been really helpful, actually. I didn't realise we were going to hear from Catchment Partnerships hosts today as well, but it's really interesting to hear how different partnerships are sort of working similarly, but also, in different ways to sort of convene and bring the sort of key stakeholders in those catchments together to try and push and incentivize and drive the sort of both regulatory authorities, but also the key players from an abstraction perspective to a more holistic view of water resource management and looking at that catchment scale. And at one point that sort of picked up when chatting said others about this point was what I put on the slide there is, water company plans that we've obviously heard from Anglian and Essex and Suffolk, but obviously also the regional plan. Therefore, they are heavily reliant on demand reduction, and CABA partnerships can be a really, really effective mouthpiece for this in a way in that, we can really start to bring multi-sector organisations together and really, really impact, sort of down to a sort of civilian level, the messaging on this and really sort of penetrate the groups and organisations that can be champions for this, but also can perhaps aren't getting the messaging from the sort of traditional water resource planning process. And that's to my next point, actually, the sort of nationally, CABA and the sort of the Rivers Trust in so much in that shape is generally working to remove barriers for catchment organisations and partnerships like yourselves that sort of currently prevent them from engaging more deeply in the sort of water resource planning process and the national framework for planning. It's a very structured, top-down, regulatory heavy process that this fund in particular was designed by the EA and sort of with support of Rivers Trust nationally to administer it, to try and address that gap and try and so through the initiatives like this and training and events, it's very much focused around breaking down those barriers, enabling more people to access the process, understand the process, and then therefore be involved in that process going forward. So it's really good to obviously hear from Anglian and Essex and Suffolk today. In terms of the sort of convener and influencing roles that Rivers Trust play, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will know Barry Bendel, but Barry sits on the sort of National CABA Water Resource Working Group. He chairs that actually, and he also sits on the Water Resources Blueprint Group, which is a sort of multi-stakeholder group that is chaired and run by the Wildlife and Countryside Link. So I've stuck a couple of links in there so you can check those out when the slides are shared. I'll very much race over this, as we've heard from others on the call already, but as I say, this fund was aimed at sort of bridging the gap and removing those barriers through the sort of facilitation and delivery of events to increase engagement and participation. And some of the examples that I was aware of already of projects and initiatives that had been funded by this was the Upper Bedford News Catchment Partnership, so the Water Everywhere conference that happened last year, I think. John, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it was last year, or at least at the start of this year. but that brought sort of around 70-ish stakeholders, I think, together, multi-sectoral stakeholders, and looking at water management. And another one that I was aware of, and it's sort of an ongoing, long-running project, is the Lark Abstraction Pilot, which has been funded for a few rounds now of this funding, which very much started off exploring abstraction efficiency opportunities within a farm cluster group, and where there were potentially opportunities to look at group licensing and other innovative ways to reduce abstraction pressure in a catchment that is sort of significantly pressured, both from a surface water abstraction but also groundwater abstraction perspective. And as John was talking before about the sort of quality and quantity of water in the river, it's a particular pressure point and pinch point for Anglian. So that's been running for several years now, and this year the fund is running it's helping them run a Lark Water Summit, which is bringing abstractors together across the agri sector, but also the sort of food, drink, supply chain sectors. So they've got some big distributors and businesses there, like British Sugar and Green King, in and around Bury St Edmunds. So Rivers Trust working with others. So talk very much thinking about from a water resource perspective here. I broke this down to the work that happens with corporates, and then the work that Rivers Trust is doing with the water industry. So firstly, when we're talking about working with corporates, we're very much talking about Rivers Trust working with corporates, developing corporate partnerships, but that's also Rivers Trust and the movement. So 99% of the delivery on the ground has been managed and done by member Rivers Trusts, so local Rivers Trusts across the country, and it's some of the relationship management has been done by the National Rivers Trust when we're working with some of these big corporates. Not all of it. Lots of local trusts have some of these relationships. But we're very much talking about replenish when we talk about working with corporates on water resource management. So replenish is a sort of shortened term for the volumetric water benefit accounting methodology, which is, in short, again, there's a couple of links in here, so for people who want to really dig into it, but it essentially empowers, using a standardized sort of science-based methodology and framework, companies to calculate and evaluate the benefits of what they do from a water stewardship activity. So you often hear from a sort of ESG commitments from companies around, they want to be carbon neutral. Well, lots of companies now are coming out, particularly ones in the food and drink supply chain, or large agri businesses are talking about water neutrality as well now, as well as carbon neutrality. So they're very much looking at how they can reduce the impact of what they do from a water, whether that's abstraction or discharge perspective within the catchments that they are using that water, and replenish. Replenish is essentially the methodology that they can use that is sort of universal. University is probably a bit much, sort of globally acknowledged as an approved methodology. So this sort of sits within the realm of water stewardship, particularly at the Rivers Trust, but they sort of define the water stewardship as the use of water that is socially and culturally equitable, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial. And this really sits well within the wheelark of CABA, sort of raising water awareness and the understanding and impact of risk that obviously this funding and what the sort of ambition of today is very much around. And then it's delivering that sort of collective action, which is where a lot of the member trusts have been involved in actually working with landowners or corporates to look at their catchments and establishing where potential action can be delivered, and then delivering that action on the ground. And then almost most importantly, wrapping those projects up and demonstrating them as a use case and a benefit and sort of a case study to influence that governance and regulation going forward. So from a replenish, as a bit of a summary of as general projects that have happened across the country delivered by Rivers Trusts, there is a really, really good spread, and you can see from the kind of businesses that have been investing in water stewardship and replenish, they are sort of within that food and drink supply chain other than sort of Amazon Web Services. Typically, but there's huge amounts of money that have been invested in water stewardship, and one of the key rules of Replenish is that all activity must happen within the same catchment that the water is taken from. So, for example, when you're looking at some of the partnerships that Norfolk Rivers Trust have been delivering in this part of the world. They've been doing the Coca-Cola work and the partnership with Carlsberg and WWF that have, the supply points for these are within the catchments that this water sensitive farm advice and wetland creation has been delivered. Likewise for Coca-Cola up in the northeast and in Yorkshire, and with Sainsbury's in the Wyre Rivers Trust. So I've got a quick case study actually based on Sainsbury's and their needs in the Wyre catchment in the northwest of England, because sort of restoring water to the aquifer isn't the only water-based need. So Sainsbury's are aiming to become water neutral by 2040, and part of that is piloting the Replenish methodology, and they've been doing this with the Wyre Rivers Trust up in the northwest, and some people may have heard of the Wyre NFM project, which is a big market-based project which looks at driving revenue and investment into NFM interventions to reduce flood risk downstream, and that then pays a return to investors for that initial investment. So Sainsbury's have been interested in this and obviously have their ambitions, and one of the principal aims of this in terms of the interventions that they're looking at installing is actually reducing flood risk, but some of the sort of additional benefits around water quality and water quantity through Replenish are being calculated as well. So looking generally at the types of Replenish volumes that they're putting in, based on the different types of interventions that they're installing, they've got a sort of annual Replenish in meters cubed. So you can see some of the, based on the scale of the interventions that they're delivering over a catchment of this size, you can see that they're looking at a sort of a minimum and maximum volumes that they'd be replenishing over the year would be significant. So they estimated, based on the Replenish calculator that the Rivers Trust have built, it's estimated that the 4 stores in the Wyre management catchment will be water neutral by 2025, which will obviously go towards supporting Sainsbury's in their sort of national ambition of water neutral by 2040. I just got some pictures of the kind of interventions that they're installing. So looking at sort of buffer strips and fencing off fields, protecting streams, sort of renaturalizing created sort of wetted areas and sort of leaky dams and barriers. There's an awful lot of monitoring and reporting included in this, so I'll rattle over this because this isn't particularly relevant, but there's an awful lot of monitoring and reporting required as a function of Replenish, and this is all wrapped up within the Wyre NFM project, but that details obviously the interventions that have been delivered and the maintenance required, any update on the volumes that are being replenished, and then obviously the photographs, more of which are here. So this is obviously quite different to where we are. This is a bit of an upland catchment, but you can see the types of interventions that Wyre Rivers Trust are delivering. So then moving on to the Rivers Trust and their work with water companies on water resources. Rivers Trust work with water industry, it's quite indirect in a lot of the work that we do. Because of the nature of the process of water resource planning and the fact that it's wrapped up in longer term strategic option development, it's relatively indirect, some of the work that actually happens, but through the work of the strategic partnerships that Rivers Trust has with water companies, all of the development of partnership opportunities and the work that Casco's doing in building a shared evidence base, and the work that member trusts are doing, sort of whether that's framework or non-framework delivery, as within the Water Industry National Environment Programme, that all goes towards influencing the water resource picture and the water resource management. And also, obviously, that involvement in the regional planning process and being on the WRE board, particularly in the Anglian region, obviously goes a long way towards that as well. So there's 5 companies at the minute that Rivers Trust have a strategic partnership with, that you can see there, and there's a couple more that are potentially exploring opportunities for strategic partnerships, all of which have similar but different scopes in terms of the work that's being delivered and where the priorities are, and they're all obviously regionally focused as well. But it helps direct funding and also gives a sort of avenue in to discuss opportunities for partnership delivery, and different mechanisms for the water industry to then actually invest in their catchments from a sort of place-based perspective. Just to finish off on something that's happening particularly in the Anglian region, so a partnership project that we're working on currently, with several people on the call. So Rivers Trust, in me and Anglian Water, WRE and the Norfolk Water Strategy Programme, we're looking at developing a NBS suitability map, or data layers, I should say, with so within the East of England for the purpose of water resources. So this will be similar to what was represented in the Norfolk Water Strategy Programme business plan that was released. I've got a couple of pictures here from that, but it's essentially, the ambition is to create this open source data layer which presents modelled opportunities for NBS across the landscape, such as runoff attenuation features, and that data set will give you an opportunity assessment of high to low opportunity for delivering water resource benefit by delivering those nature-based solutions. The sort of granularity of data behind that will vary across the region, because we have areas with the groundwater model, and we have areas where we'll be using proxy data to infer the opportunity, but that's something that we're working on currently. And that's everything from me. Sorry, I've